Welcome back to another episode of the Scottish Land and Estates podcast, Scotland Matters. Today's episode is a special edition to celebrate International Women's Day for 2025. I'm Anine Stevenson, Digital Communications Assistant here at SLE, and today I'm joined by two incredible women who have led, inspired and pushed for change in the rural sector and beyond. Our Chief Executive here at SLE, Sarah Jane Laing, and SLE Board Member and Managing Director of Laidlaw Communications, Lucy Laidlaw. So this year's theme for International Women's Day is #AccelerateAction, which is all about pushing forward, taking meaningful steps towards change, whether in leadership, career development or everyday life. So today, towards the end of this episode, we'll be hearing the voices of our SLE colleagues, diving into real stories, lessons learned, and what we can all do to support and uplift women in workplaces and our communities. So I'd love to start by asking both of you, throughout your careers, you've worked alongside many remarkable women. Can you share a story of a woman who really inspired you? Lucy, who's someone that's made a lasting impact on you?
So it's so hard because there are actually so many amazing women, especially in our sector, and we maybe don't spend enough time shouting about them. But somebody who's really stuck with me is a lady called Jenny McCare, who I did the Rural Leadership Programme with, a good 10 years ago. Jenny is a first-generation farmer. She actually calls herself a gin farmer, which maybe is why I like her so much. But she is one of these people in life who has set her goals, gone for them, turned up, found time to give to other people. And when something hasn't gone right for her, she's pivoted, she's moved on, she's brushed herself off and she's kept going. And she is very, very capable of giving me a good kick up the behind when I need one too. Yeah. And she's someone that I feel very, very grateful to have in my team, but also somebody that I watch and think, wow, you are the epitome of somebody who is representing women in the best way. And I feel incredibly proud of her as a friend, but also very inspired by her as a business person.
Yeah, that's such a powerful example. And I think we all have moments where someone's leadership or support can completely shift our perspective. So speaking of that, SJ, can you share a time in your own career where you felt particularly empowered? Maybe a breakthrough moment where you realised just how much of an impact that you could have?
Do you know, I think when you start reflecting on this, as Lucy said, it's actually really hard to kind of identify one person or one single moment. Mm-hmm. And when I was thinking about this, there have been different times at different stages in my career. And I think one of them was when I actually undertook some formal leadership training through the Windsor Leadership Trust. Mm-hmm. And it was a fantastic course that really kind of, I was going to sort of say, you bare your soul. So you kind of go back to your basic leadership values and then kind of on the back of that, think about how you then bring that to your workplace, how you can then turn up as a leader. And I think I was a different person when I came back to SLE after being at the Windsor Leadership Trust. It really made me think about who I was as a person and how I could use my own values. Yeah, I think before that, if I'm honest, I think it was a bit of I think we've maybe all been, you're trying to sort of emulate other styles. Yeah. So I think the Windsor Leadership Trust allowed me to think, this is who I am. Mm-hmm. These are my leadership values, my leadership styles, and this is how I can lead based on that, rather than trying to think, that person's amazing, how can I be just like them? Yeah. So that was a moment when I really felt empowered, and I see it as a real pivotal moment. I think the other one is it's always great to sort of see the validation from others. Mm-hmm. So I think when I was asked to be chief executive of Scottish Land and Estates, I have to recognise that was a chance for the organisation to look externally. As a long-standing organisation, they have profile, they have clout, they could have gone out to the marketplace, and they had faith in me to take on that role. So the first woman to be CEO in 120 years of the organisation, that was something I think I played it down to begin with. Lucy, remember that time I started saying, it's fine. But in reality, it was a big deal. And I think I leant in, I thought, you need to lean into this and own it and celebrate it and use it as a way to highlight to other women in the rural sector that the top jobs are open to us. So absolutely. Those were two kind of pivotal moments.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And also, let's look on the flip side. Obviously, in leadership, you've got some incredible positive moments. You've also got some really tough, hard moments that sometimes you just can't prepare for. And were there any moments where you felt maybe out of your depth? That we've all been there, the sink or swim moments. Lucy or SJ, either one of you, how do you think you grow from those experiences?
I think for me, and I think a lot of people are the same, is periods of change, times when you make big change are incredibly daunting. They can lead to the most empowering moments. But in that moment of taking the leap, it can be incredibly scary. And I certainly know when I went out on my own, you go from having accountants and lawyers and IT specialists and lots of people around you to bounce ideas off. And suddenly when I set up on my own, I found myself sitting in front of that computer on day one going, right, I'm the accountant, I'm the lawyer, I'm the IT specialist, and you go, gosh, right, okay, how do we go from here? And actually, very quickly, you learn what you're capable of, and you work hard, you learn things, you educate yourself when you don't have the skills or the knowledge, but actually being put in a situation where you have to do something that you haven't done before is probably the most powerful way of empowering yourself to get things done.
Yeah, I think anytime you sort of step out your comfort zone, you know, it's an opportunity to grow, to develop, and we shouldn't just stay with what we're great at and what we're comfortable with. And I think if I think back to a particular moment, I would say about 15 months into COVID, that probably was a time when, the first year, I was, I've got this, we're getting there. Amazing service being delivered by the team. The feedback from members was fantastic. But about 15 months in, I'll be honest, suddenly, I was trying to be the best mum, the best CEO, the best everything, best daughter, trying to support parents and others. And I just suddenly ran out of energy. And I think what I learned then was about, again, what are my values? One of my values is honesty. So sort of saying to the people around me, saying to my board members, saying to, to colleagues, to family, I'm struggling a little bit here, guys. So I think that honesty when you're facing challenges and sort of saying, here's what I could really do with. So leaning on the strengths of those around you. Because I think as a woman at times, you kind of think, I've got to do this all myself. So I think there are times when, it is really sort of saying, I'm a strong woman. I've got skills, but I need help. And I think that again was a, as I say, back to kind of thinking, who am I? I'm an honest person. I need to be honest about the struggle I'm facing just now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of the times as well, I feel like you're managing the expectations that you have for yourself, but also potential expectations you think other people have on you, whether they're a reality or not. And they're quite daunting. And I know I felt that when I basically, as Lucy said, just kind of went for it with SLE when I applied to work here and when I started working here. That was something that I hadn't necessarily planned for, but I just thought, I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to try. And then if I don't get it, I don't get it. But if I do, then that's a chance to try new things. And it was complete. I feel like everything kind of refreshed and I saw everything differently. That before I was just working along, doing a retail job, doing what was easy and that I was good at, and now I feel like I've completely changed. But part of that is, and what makes episodes like this and this conversation so great, is that I think I've learned so much from women like you, is those expectations you have for yourself, but for others as well. And that's really
But
nice.
there's also something, I think, about it being okay for it. You can be a leader and still not be on your top form all the time, and actually asking for help or admitting when potentially your bucket's empty and you need somebody else to step in and help. Because I think actually what doesn't do women any favours is that perception of other women being able to manage everything all the time at fast pace and never having a dip. So actually, I think being able to acknowledge that we're all doing our best, and sometimes we've got it all completely sussed, and sometimes we need to take a step back or we need to refill our bucket and take help from other people. And I think what SJ said, asking for help is really, really important.
And it is that balance between, sort of shooting for the stars and kind of finding the things that you really thrive on, like, as you're doing just now. And sometimes there's slogs. And it is, getting that balance. It's not always about that kind of shining and thriving and the new opportunity. Sometimes it's months or even years of, hard work and hard slog. And I think it's just kind of making sure that you've got that balance, that balance right, and never being afraid to take those, those shots. Because what's the worst that could happen? Someone says no, you get turned down, but there's other opportunities. So that kind of bravery, I think, is something that we kind of need to instill in all women. And it's interesting because we kind of talk about advice to younger women, but I think there's also women who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, who have still got opportunities to be brave. So the brave isn't just for the young. Brave's for all of us, kind of thing. There's brave opportunities we can take at all stages of our life, and I think accelerate action isn't just for young women thinking about their leadership journeys. It's for all of us.
No, definitely,
absolutely,
exactly. We've covered about
old people like me.
Not at all.
About 3
young
questions.
People like us.
3 questions I was going to ask. So let's move on to another one. Let's talk about leadership and navigating challenges. So, of course, tough decisions come with the job. Looking back, what's one of the hardest decisions you had to make as a leader, and how did it shape you?
There was a time, I don't know if it's a leadership, but it was definitely a decision about my journey. And I was offered a promoted post at Scottish Borders Council, but I was 3 months into maternity leave for my second child. So he was, a couple of months old. I had another child who was only 2, so 2 kids under 3.
Yeah.
And I thought this was kind of my dream job. It was a brand new job created.
Yeah.
At the time, the senior officer was a woman. She was like, "This is a perfect job for you." So I went and did my interview, and they were like, "Yep, absolutely." And I said, "Well, so I'm not planning coming back till sort of 9 months' time." And they said, "Oh no, if you want this job, you come back now, and it's full time." And I was like 2 months postpartum, and I sort of just, because I'm thinking back, this is like 21 years ago. Senior roles, there was an opportunity for job share. They'd only just started to introduce job share for slightly junior roles. And I had to say, no thanks. Yeah. And that was really tough, because I knew that was a job that I would have really nailed.
Excelled,
And I'll be honest, when I came back and the person was in it, I kept thinking, you're not as good as I am. I could have done this.
I hope they're listening to this.
Do you know what was really bad? They were told by the person that they only got the job because I turned it down. And when I came back in below them, that was not a great working relationship to be in.
No.
But sort of saying, no, I have to pause this leadership journey because I have to focus on my children.
Yeah.
Was really difficult, and I honestly for a long time felt that I'd missed my chance. Yeah. So again, I think that was a really difficult decision. Some of in a kind of more senior role, some of the difficult decisions have been, I think, probably people orientated.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
There are really hard conversations that you have to have, and you have to lean into them. So you have to give constructive feedback to people. You have to say, no, sorry, you're not the right person for this role. Yeah. And that's really, really difficult. Yeah. You have to accept that I sound like someone we all know, but with rights come responsibilities, but with leadership brings with it responsibilities, and that, again, back to being honest. It's really important to be honest with the people that you're supporting and that are in your team and beyond. So some really
you are
conversations.
Doing them a favour in the long run, because putting someone in a position where they're in a role or they're taking a responsibility that they're maybe not quite ready for yet, it doesn't mean they won't ever be, is actually doing them a disservice to you, because you're putting them in an incredibly difficult situation. So I think sometimes, although delivering those messages can feel awful and you can sometimes see the heartbreak on someone's face when you're delivering them, I think the honesty, ultimately, I like to think, will in the long run serve them better.
And always making sure you're doing it in a way which allows that person to see where they can develop,
absolutely,
where they can grow, where the opportunities are. So
and so let's head back a little bit back to being a woman, being in the workplace. I think there's still a long way to go in terms of entire gender equality when it comes to things in leadership and overcoming barriers. But in your experience, Lucy, what do you think the biggest barrier is holding women back in their careers?
When I was talking about doing this podcast, somebody who I won't name did say that I should not get on my soapbox about certain things. So I'll talk about this in a very gentle way. I know, you feel really strongly about it. So I think fundamentally there is a motherhood penalty, and I admire people who choose not to go back to work because that is their choice after they've had children. If that is what is right for them and their family, absolutely. But what slightly irks me is the number of people that don't have a choice. Yeah. Now, whether that's lack of affordable childcare, lack of childcare at all, especially in rural areas where there's no wraparound care. There's certainly no wraparound care for my kids at the school they're at the moment. The fact that there's very few flexible jobs, very few part-time jobs at a leadership level, and it's still ultimately a fundamental belief that women are the people that should be taking on that care role. Now, that is definitely changing, and I can see a lot of, especially leadership from some of the bigger organisations, which is brilliant because they're changing things and they're really encouraging shared parental leave and these sorts of things. But if you look at the statistics, and there's organisations, and I hope I can say this, like Pregnant and Screwed, that basically they've got a YouTube video going, and it's called the CV Shredder. Wow. And they are encouraging women to upload their CVs to demonstrate that their CV was shredded after they had kids, and the numbers are frightening. And I would hate for somebody to feel that they were in a position where they didn't have a choice, and that's not great for anyone. And I think that is holding back the sector, but also taking people out of the sector who are brilliant, and that's a real shame as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think kind of linked to that, it's the headspace. So I often kind of talk about the fact that, you might have brilliant childcare support, but as a woman, you're probably still the person who's having to think about, do they need a swimming kit?
Yeah.
When's the parents' evening? Do I need to kind of book into that? And I'm really, really lucky. I have an absolutely fantastic husband. I could not do the job I do without him. But we have a different approach. He's a very functional parent. I can do that. He's always there, does it all. But I still have to think about quite a lot of it. Yeah. And I think that's just, again, just kind of who we are. And I do remember throwing a tantrum as a female leader. I kind of ran in to a meeting a little bit late, when my 3 kids were all quite young. And I was the only woman in the room, and everyone was a parent. But these guys were standing drinking coffee, and they were all very relaxed, kind of thing. And one of them kind of went like that. And when I say I was late, I think I was like 1 minute past when I was supposed to be there. And I turned around and said, "And did you make a lasagna before you left the house this morning?" And he kind of looked at me. He's like, "Calm down." And I was like, because I was thinking, I need to leave something because, God's really busy at work. I've got to get this done. I've got to get the kids out. And I knew these guys had just, I won't name who they were, but they had clearly had a very relaxed morning and just kind of commuted into work. Yeah. So I think that there still is a little bit of that kind of imbalance as to kind of what's expected of you. But a lot of that comes from us as mothers, absolutely. Because I didn't need to make that lasagna. I didn't.
You're right.
But you're kind of thinking, I need to do this. I need to do this. I need to be the person that's doing this. Yeah. So a lot of that, some of it is coming from others, but a lot of it is coming from women ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I would put my hands up to that being one of my biggest weaknesses, is me thinking I have to do everything. And actually, again, it comes back to this point where it's okay to say, no, I can't do that. I think there's something really powerful, though, as well, about having women in leadership roles who do have to finish the meeting when the meeting is meant to actually finish because they have somewhere else to be, and that not being seen as a weakness.
Yeah, exactly.
It is okay that we have lives out with work.
Yeah. And it's nice you see that more and more often. Yeah, exactly. And I think, I'd like to think that's a culture we have at Scottish Land and Estates, certainly now. And making sure that, who we are isn't just who we are in the workplace. It's us as an entire person
as well. And I think it's great that having that example set from leadership roles definitely trickles down, and it does make a difference that you see that that's acceptable and that you can that it is acceptable. So I do think there's something really special about knowing that you're making a difference for other women, whether it's through mentorship or leading by example, as we just said. So can you share a moment where you truly felt like you were helping open doors for other women or making a difference in their lives? Esther, do you want to?
Absolutely. Can I go back to mentorship?
Yeah.
Because I just kind of want to explore that, because I've been mentored and I am a mentor, and I have to say I think it's one of the most powerful things that you can do. And having a mentor that challenges you but has your back really makes a difference.
Yeah.
And I it's something I'd urge everyone to kind of have a look at. Mentors outside your industry as well as those within it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, Lucy, but I just think it's such a powerful tool.
I remember being at a meeting with somebody and being just completely bowled over by them and just amazed by what they had achieved. Maybe I should have picked her when I was looking earlier. But actually, afterwards, I was telling somebody about how amazing this person had been. And they were like, email them and ask them if they would be your mentor. And I was like, oh, gosh, no, they won't have time. They won't. And I did. And she did. Yeah. And actually, it occurred to me that actually nobody is ever going to be offended by somebody emailing them and saying, wow, I just really enjoyed meeting you. I thought what you had to say was amazing. Yeah. I wondered if you might have time to meet up and have a coffee and chat and maybe put kind of a mentoring agreement in place. So I think that would be something I would urge anyone to do, that if there's somebody that impresses you, then they're only going to be delighted to have somebody get in touch with them and say, and obviously if they don't have capacity, they don't have to have capacity, but you've not lost anything. Yeah. And I think you're right. I think mentoring is an amazing tool, and I've been mentored as well, and I really valued it.
Yeah, and again, back to the kind of honesty that I talked about before. So Julia Lato, who you know, was my mentor for a little while, and so Julia Lato, who works with the Rural Leaders Programme for years, is a really honest mentor. Yep. And I used to love when he would kind of be looking at things, and she'd be talking about, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? And I'd say something, she'd go, come on, cut the crap, kind of thing. Yeah. Dull, boring, come on, push yourself. And I need that. The last thing, I don't need that kind of,
sugarcoating it.
Sugarcoating it. I need someone who, you mentioned earlier, gives you a kick up the bum and really challenges you. So I that was really good for me. Mm-hmm. So sorry, back to your question. Remind us what it was.
No, it's good. It does answer it partly. It was just to share a moment where you truly felt like you were helping open doors for other women. So whether it's through mentorship or in the workplace or even just a friend, colleague.
So I was a member of the Women in Agriculture Task Force, and when we were in the task force pulling together the kind of big strategy document, I'll be honest with you, it didn't feel that momentous. I mean, it was an amazing bunch of women to work with, co-chaired by Joyce Campbell, who is probably one of the unrecognised leaders in our industry, and that's because Joyce doesn't see herself as a leader, and she really, really is. But it was just after that when the first cohort went through the training. And I'm going to blow my own trumpet here a little bit. We'd advised a training programme, which was all about empowering women. And we were trying to come up with a name for it. And I don't know where, but just sort of around the dinner table, the sort of lunch table, I sort of said, it's about learning how to be your best self. So we called it Be Your Best Self.
Yeah.
And I spoke to somebody who was one of the very first groups, and they sort of said, that training programme has changed my life. And I kind of thought, we were responsible for that, so because not only did we sort of say that's the gap, we were also involved in shaping what that training looked like. So I think that, and now you've got scores of women who've kind of gone through that, and the feedback is still the same. The trainers, the people who deliver the training are amazing, but the concept came from a group of women and men who'd sort of said, look, women in agriculture are missing out. Yeah. So that was a seminal moment for me.
Yeah. Incredible to have those open conversations as well. And to share those men and women together in one place is really powerful. Yeah.
I think, we can talk about when I spoke to a group about something, or these, different training opportunities or mentoring things. Actually, do you know what I think is it's a consistency. I think people consistently seeing people turning up, working hard, getting stuff done, showing that you can do that and still be personable, build good relationships, hopefully have a decent balance with your life at home as well. And I think actually, when I was thinking about it when I knew I was coming to do this, and I don't think there's one moment, but I would like to think that my consistent actions hopefully demonstrate that, and hopefully other people feel that you don't need to do something big to make a difference. You can just get stuff done and work hard, and I think that in itself is probably quite powerful too.
Well, it's back to values, because I think you epitomise your values, and it's just constantly being true to those values. I think you're absolutely right, and it's think about our kids as well, and because of course it's not just about inspiring women. It's about inspiring the next generation of men to think about women leaders in a way that maybe their older cohorts hadn't.
So, and for it not to be strange.
No.
For it not actually to even be a conversation. I suppose is actually the point.
Exactly. No, that's incredible. That is incredible. So again, we're leading on to the next question perfectly. So as we're talking about accelerating action, let's tune in. Let's focus on what women can do today, but also, as we just said, not women, men as well, everyone. If you had one piece of advice, one action every woman listening can take right now to push herself forward in her career, what would it be?
How do we narrow it down to one?
I know. The pressure. Control what you can control. Mm-hmm. I've spent, or wasted, I would say, an awful lot of time worrying about things that I can't control and dwelling on what other people might think. And actually, it is wasted time. And we don't have a lot of time. I certainly don't have a lot of spare time. I imagine you don't have a lot of spare time either. And I think control what you can control. Focus on what you have the capacity to change, and don't forget your values.
And I think kind of obviously linked to that before I choose my own one, but you mentioned about expectations, and I think it's back to the fact that realising that the expectations that you have on yourself are far higher than what are there externally. So a lot of the pressure that you're talking about is coming from yourself. So it's trying to, treating yourself as you would treat others. Be much kinder to yourself. So that I think that's a really strong one. Not trying to do it all yourself, I think it's kind of linked to that as well, that, recognising that it's not a weakness if you're utilising other skills or other traits and strengths in others. But being brave is probably the one thing that I would sort of say to people. Like I think, bravery is not something that comes naturally to some people. No. And you do just sometimes, we talked about it earlier, shoot for the stars. And go for it. And that can, that's everything from speaking to someone at an event. Just making that first steps to speak to somebody, or to pop your CV and your application in for a job that you never think you're gonna get. Sometimes these things pay off. So being brave.
Definitely.
So we're all at different stages of our careers. I don't mind owning it. That I'm in my early 50s. You guys are nowhere near that. Have things really changed? Because I was kind of thinking back to, when I was younger, I had quite a lot of imposter syndrome, but also, I'd walk into a meeting with people, men who were my peers, and I'd be expected to take the notes and often be expected to make the coffee. I'd like to think things have changed, but have they?
So I'd say from my perspective, I'm just about 1 year into my first ever kind of professional role, and I think imposter syndrome, from my perspective, being at this age, I'm still in university, I'm learning as I go. I have a lot of pressure on myself to set my standards really high for myself and make sure that I'm being thought of as an equal, which I always am, and I've never had an experience in this workplace where I felt like I haven't been treated that way. But in previous experiences, there have been moments where I think for my age, I would want to feel like I could sit at the table, even just to listen and learn and ask questions and be given a chance to prove myself that I could do it. And I wasn't given that chance, perhaps stereotype based on being still a student or being younger, that I felt like I was pushing against barriers of my work ethic or responsibilities or my knowledge over certain subjects. Coming in here, it's been really incredible. The experience I've had, the opportunities to learn, the chances to try things, make mistakes and develop from them. But imposter syndrome is something that I think I deal with a lot. And it goes up and down. That day I'll have weeks where I feel like I'm absolutely killing it, smashing it. And then I'll have weeks where something doesn't really go right. But it's nice being able to talk about this openly. But I do think it's something that everyone deals with. And I hope that that changes one day. But Lucy, what about you? How do you
you asked about the whether or not you've had someone assume you should take minutes or the only reason you're in the room is because you set up the meeting. Or do you know what? I think most people are past that. I think even the people that think it know better than to say it. But there are still a few people. And I toil with do we need to give a bit of grace to people who have been brought up a certain way, have lived a lifetime that way, and it's not an intentional slight. It's just what they know, or whether or not actually we're now at the point where we say, hang on a second, this is why I'm here. This is the value I bring. I don't think I've actually ever had the guts to call somebody out on it, even still. I think I will politely explain why I am there, but I've never actually said to somebody, why did you assume that?
Yeah.
And you asked if things have changed. I think they are changing, but I don't think we're there yet.
And I still think that those moments, they make a lasting impact, that they have for me at times where that's hung on and I've clinged on to that and it's stuck, that it might be such an insignificant moment for somebody else, or that they've said it or they haven't meant something that they've said, but you cling on to it, and I do anyway, but also just used it as a rocket up my bum, basically, just as a fire to push through that. Maybe don't address them in person, and maybe that's the pressure that we face as well, of not complaining and just getting on with it.
And I suppose what a gift to be underestimated, and then to go in and absolutely smash it, and then have them leaving going, oh, I got that one wrong, without you actually having to call it out. Just go in there and do what you do and prove yourself by the fact that you're damn good at what you do.
Yeah. I mean, I do feel that things have changed. Certainly when I kind of go into some of the senior meetings now, the gender balance has changed a little bit,
definitely.
And certainly there's definitely equal respect regardless of gender. So I do kind of feel that things have changed. And Lucy, you kind of mentioned about changing attitudes and dealing with things with some good grace. I do remember the first ever presentation I did for SLE. So you're talking 20 years ago, and an elderly member came up to me at the end and said, "You're very smart for a girl," and I sort of went, "Oh," and I took it quite negatively, and then I heard him talking about me to somebody else, and he was like, "This woman's amazing," and go and speak to her, and he should just have left off the "for a girl," because he genuinely thought I was really smart, and was telling other people I was smart, and he was leaving off "for a girl," but that's the bit that kept sticking with me, and saw him a few times. Sadly, he's no longer with us, but a few times after that, and he was one of my biggest champions. So again, he was not meaning what he said in a derogatory way because I was a woman. He really was genuinely praising me, and he thought that was a way of telling me. So
I've definitely had people professionally who I think it's sometimes when you feel that they're treating you differently because it's not in a bad way, but they are treating you differently because you're a woman. I've had somebody phone me up after a meeting and congratulate me for doing well, and I sort of thought, I was just doing my job. I don't know. Are you surprised that I did well? And that you then start to second guess the stuff that's actually meant to be nice. But I genuinely don't believe that person in question would have phoned a man in that room and congratulated them on doing well in that meeting. So I don't know. I think we are definitely getting there.
And it's hard to let go of those smaller things, and sometimes, as you said, second guessing it and overcomplicating it. But I think I think the best thing is just to have these conversations openly, and for other women hearing this to know that if something happens, that actually you're not the only person this has happened to,
and to call it out, especially if you're a person in a leadership position, in a more senior position, to kind of call it out. And I'll be honest, I think back in 20 years of Scottish Land and Estates, I don't think I've ever had any disadvantage from an organisational point of view as a woman. Certainly I've never experienced anything like that internally or from the membership. I have from others in the sector. And again, I think that's one of the reasons when we kind of looked at the sort of women in agriculture. I have had comments made, and someone very high profile within the within the farming sector phoned a previous chairman and said, "Get that woman back in her box." And that's what they said. And I have to say, our previous chairman sort of said, "Well, you're a braver man than I am if you want to try and say that to her, but also, kind of, how dare you?"
I think we could have sold tickets to see your reaction to that, actually.
But again, that was from someone else, a high profile male in the agriculture sector saying, I don't like what that woman's saying, and rather than sort of saying to me as a peer, I'd like to disagree with you, telling a man to tell me to shut up.
Yeah, and
that I have to say that. I mean, I talk about putting a rocket up your bum. That one definitely did.
Little does he know that you are where you are today because people like that underestimated you.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's the thing.
So I think that brings us to a really good close. But finally, if there's one major step we can take today as individuals, organisations or communities to better support women in leadership, what would it be? Lucy, do you want to start?
I think be generous with your time if you've got the capacity to do that. And I think if you can make time for other people, whether that's through mentoring, whether that's through volunteering for organisations, things like the Women in Ag that SJ talked about. I think if you've got capacity, then be generous with your time so that other people can learn from your experiences, and hopefully hopefully they will then be in a room one day talking about the fact that they watched what you did and it helped them to get where they are. And I think women supporting women, and I know it sounds cheesy, but I think we're in it together and supporting each other.
I had something very similar. You'd think that we'd actually spoken to each other before we did.
We didn't.
No, but it is actually, it's about not always thinking about the I. It's thinking about, your contribution to the team, contribution to the sector that you work in, and the contribution to kind of wider society, and back to the Windsor Leadership Trust. That was all about the contribution that leadership can make to society. And I do think there are times in our career when, the sweet spot of, my own development, my team success, my organisation success, it gets a bit out of kilter because it's all about me.
Yeah.
And I think that there are times when we just have to kind of not take a step back, but take that bigger picture, because your own personal success might come sooner, or it might be greater if you're playing a part in the wider success of your sector.
Yeah. No, those are two incredible pieces of advice. So, SJ, Lucy, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your experiences today. It's been incredibly inspiring hearing the challenges you've overcome, women who've inspired you, you've inspired me, both of you, and the steps we can all take to accelerate action. So before we wrap up, we also wanted to share the voices of our own SLE colleagues, their career journeys, who inspires them, and advice to their younger selves at the start of their career. So we'll hear from them now. What's one word to describe your journey?
My career journey, I would say that I was blessed.
Unexpected.
Meandering.
Unscripted.
Tumultuous.
Exhilarating.
Fortuitous.
Meandering.
Transformational.
Unplanned.
Who's a woman who inspires you?
J.K. Rowling.
Margaret Thatcher.
I have to say my mum.
Sahara Hashimi.
My name's Christiana. She advocates for women's health.
Mary Curie.
Dolly Parton.
Oprah Winfrey.
Personally, my mother, who has now passed away.
And what's one piece of advice you'd tell your younger self at the start of her career?
Make sure you're always your own best friend.
Take on as much as you can. Work for as many people as you can.
It would be, if you don't ask, you won't get anything.
That it's okay to be the only woman in the room, but you've got to make your voice heard.
Take risks and be spontaneous. Understand when good is good enough.
People don't think about you as much as you think they do.
To be brave and jump into any opportunity.
I think it would be trust the process. I think that your career doesn't always take you where you think it will, and really look at what you want to carve out for yourself in your future.
Never give up.
Travel more before you get stuck in a job, and to see the world.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Scottish Land and Estates podcast, Scotland Matters. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to follow us on your favourite streaming platforms, and now follow us on YouTube. You can also follow us on social media for more updates on events and everything SLE gets up to. Thank you for listening, and take care.